Hey guys, Nandhini here with the Go and Chess Trio. Today I'm going to show you another opening trap, the Lasker trap. And this opening trap is named after Emanuel Lasker, who was the world chess champion for 27 long years from 1894 to 1921. Now this is a pretty unusual opening trap because it features an under promotion as early as the 7th move to win you the game. Now what is an under promotion? Well, under promotion is when you promote your pawn to something less than a queen. So it could be a rook, bishop or knight. Sounds really exciting, right? Let's get straight to it. White begins with d4, d5, c4, and we have the queen's gambit on the board. And here black responds with the Albin Counter Gambit with e5. Now this trap is really useful for players who do play the queen's gambit from white side, because a lot of your opponents are going to play the Albin Counter Gambit against you, and you should definitely have an idea about the do's and don'ts. And about black, well, this is a really good opening trap to learn, trust me. So over here, white's regular, and probably the best way to continue is just accepting the gambit with d into e5. Now in this position, black goes d4, having a good pawn on d4, gaining space advantage and putting pressure on the white pieces, because now, as you see, this knight on b1 regularly comes to the c3 square, but now that's not possible because the d4 pawn has taken away that square. So over here, the best way for white to continue is just continue development with knight f3, attack the d4 pawn, and black responds with knight c6, and the game goes on. But a very common mistake in this position is playing the move e3 in this position, because it's pretty natural to do so, because white is expecting and really hoping for black to continue d into e3, because then he has queen into d8 check, and he takes away castling from the black king. And after bishop e3, white actually has not just a very good position, but he's also material up. You have to keep that in mind. And it's really easy for him to continue over here. He can go knight c3, long castles, knight f3, bishop e2, and the game's really easy, and black does not have any compensation for the pawn lost. Now getting back, after e3, d into e3 is what white is hoping for, but black is not going to do that. So here black goes with bishop b4 check, and now white has to first get rid of the check. So here there are two ways for white to do that. White can play bishop d2 as well as knight d2 and block the check. We'll have a look at both of them one by one. If white does continue knight d2, black has d into e3, and after f into e3, you see white may be having an extra pawn, but his pawn structure is ruined. The e3 and the e5 pawns are really weak. And here black has queen h4 check, a very typical check, a very typical move in this opening. And after queen h4 check, g3 is pretty obvious to block the check. And black has the very nice queen e4 over here, threatening to take the h1 rook. You have to note that this knight cannot capture the queen because he is pinned by our bishop on b4. And here knight 1 f3 defends the rook, and over here as black you can definitely capture queen into e3, but this is not going to be the best way for you to continue because white has queen e2 in this position, and since there is no e3 pawn, later on in the endgame white's bishop will be free to get out and will have squares to go to. So definitely not the best way. And yes, this pawn is also quite strong over here, taking away squares from your pieces too. So instead of the move queen into e3, let's go a move back. Here, it's better to go for the e5 pawn instead, because he is basically stopping your knight from developing too. So why not go for the e5 pawn first? So you can play the move knight c6 over here, threatening to simply capture the e5 pawn. White can go king f2, defending e3, and also threatening to capture the e4 queen. Now, as black, you can capture bishop into d2, and after bishop into d2, you just capture knight into e5, and Black is having a really good position considering that white is also having a weak e3 pawn, which is a really important factor in this position. Now, let's go back and see what happens for the move bishop d2 instead. So, white can play the move bishop d2 and is definitely hoping for black to capture bishop into d2 in this position, but black is definitely not going to do that. And in this position as black can play the move d into e3. Again, this bishop is hanging, but that's a sacrifice. So after d into e3, let's first see what white should be doing in this position before we get straight to the trap. White's best way to continue is f into e3. And it's probably the only way to continue actually. And black has the typical, again, the queen h4 check. And then g3. And again, queen e4 as we have seen even earlier. And again over here, he's actually, the queen's actually attacking the h1 rook, the e3 pawn, as well as the e5 pawn. So it's a triple attack. So the point is, again, to defend the h1 rook, white will have to play something like knight f3. And you have queen into e3 this time because, again, as you see, the d2 bishop is still pinned. So over here, bishop e2, then you have bishop into d2, queen into d2, queen into d2, knight into d2, and you can play knight e7. And black is having a pretty good position over here. And what is he going to try to do next, and what is his idea? Let's just see how he should be placing his pieces. Well, black should try to get c5 to take control of d4, and then knight c6, castling. And the point of knight g7 was going knight g6 to put pressure on e5, so yes. And then maybe rook e8 again to put more pressure on e5. So this is going to be black's idea of development. And black is doing fine, as I have already mentioned. Now, let's go back. Let's go to see what the Lasker trap exactly is. So after d into e3, if white does play the move bishop into b4, now this is a very big blunder for white because black gets e into f2 check, and the king really cannot capture king into f2 because this queen is hanging and black would simply be a queen up in this position. So let's go back. So after e into f2, white is forced to play the move king g2. Now in these positions, when the king and queen are in one line like this, we generally would prefer to play the move bishop g4. But in this position, if we do play bishop g4, white gets knight f3, and that's not really going to help us. So the point is, we have to first capture the knight on g1. Now, how do we capture it? If we do capture it and promote the pawn to a queen, then white equalizes by simply playing queen into d8, king into d8, and rook into g1, and the position is equal. So let's go back. What should black do in this position? Now, this was the under promotion I was talking about at the beginning in the intro. So the point is, black has to play the surprising but very beautiful move f into g1 and promote it, basically under promote it and make it a knight. So this is a check, and over here we have got rid of the g1 knight of white. So if white does capture rook into g1, black has bishop g4, and after king f2, he simply picks up the white queen. Now let's go back. So white definitely cannot capture rook into g1. This knight really can't be captured. It's like a poisoned knight. So over here, white has to play king e1 again because the king has to keep the queen defended. And in this position, black goes with, again, we know this move already. We have seen it a couple of times already. Queen h4 check. And in this position, g3 is not going to help white because black has queen e4, the double attack as you see on the board. The rook on h1 is falling. However, wherever the king moves, queen into h1, and black has won the rook. So let's go back. g3 is really not helping white. Now the best try white could have in this position is playing the move king d2 and trying to run to c1 with his king. But this is definitely not going to help white in any way, but yes, definitely the best try. Here is black. You can definitely continue with knight c6 and you are attacking the b4 bishop. So if white does capture rook into knight, you can capture knight into b4, you can play queen d4 and pick up the rook. Well, anything should be winning for you. But basically, why was knight c6 played? Knight c6 was played because now our next idea will be getting the bishop out wherever and going long castles and again giving a check and taking advantage of white's uncastled king. And this is already winning for black. Whatever white does, black is already winning in every single variation. So yes, this is the Lasker trap. I hope you all enjoyed it. And I will definitely be coming up with more traps in the next video, so stay tuned. And if you did like this video, please give us a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. I'll see you soon. Bye.